You're watching Spirit in the Frame. It's just like watching Bob Ross, but with little happy demons. I'm your host, Dave Zilla. You can Google me later. Spirit in the Frame. Well, the frame isn't always a picture frame. Sometimes it's a cave wall, a flame, a patch of mold on the ceiling, but there's always something in it, some spirit. We're not just looking at art here, we're looking at how art looks back. Today is episode 1, and what's the subject? How seeing shapes in stones turned humans into artists. Before we ever painted gods and monsters or saints, we were painting things that we thought we saw out of the corner of our eyes. Imagine climbing down into a cave. It's dark, damp, that kind of dark that just doesn't end, you know? You're crawling on your belly. It's wet with condensation and probably some kind of strange fungus that lives down there. The air gets thinner the further down you go. Your torch would start to sputter and flicker, and the air smells like bat shit and cold stone and probably some other things we don't want to think about. This is where you decide you're going to paint. Now, in that flickering firelight, you might notice a curve on the cave wall that kind of just sort of resembles the back of a bison. Or maybe a crack over here splinters off and kind of looks like antlers of a deer. This isn't mere imagination. It's pareidolia. It's our brain's tendency to find meaningful patterns in randomness. Cambridge Dictionary defines pareidolia as a situation in which someone sees a pattern or image of something that does not exist. For example, a face in a cloud. And the word pareidolia comes from the Greek para, which means beside or instead of, and eidolon, which is image, form, or shape. We all do it. You're in the shower, you notice a weird face in the tile, or maybe you've run across one of those devoted few who swear Jesus appeared in their multigrain toast. Pareidolia. You catch a glimpse of something, and maybe it's a face of an animal, something kind of half alive in the shadows, and your brain does what it's been doing for 100,000 years. It's trying to make a story out of the chaos. And that right there is the seed of art. Recent studies of Paleolithic cave art have shown that humans were not just slapping chalk and ochre on the cave walls. They were collaborating with the cave itself. They were using the natural shapes that were already there, the cracks, bulges, and rough spots. They saw those bumps and lump of rock and were like, yep, that's a bison. Art wasn't a hobby back then. It was a survival strategy. It was negotiation with whatever was watching us from the dark. That impulse, that twitch in your skull when you see a face in the peeling paint or a figure lurking in the clouds, it's not gone. It's hardwired into you. Our brains are pattern addicts. You throw some static at us, or a cloudy sky, a mossy wall, a weird stain on the floor, and we squint, and suddenly there's a face. This wasn't idle daydreaming. It was a survival strategy. You know, back then you had about 2 seconds to decide, is that dappled light in the trees over there just light from the sun, or is that a leopard? You know, you guess wrong and you're going to be dinner. Guess right and you live to paint about it later. Our minds were bent to err on the side of better safe than eaten. If you saw a shape, you had to imagine it was alive. You saw a crack, you had to imagine it was breathing. It's the same glitch that makes us stare into campfires and see whole stories unfolding in this flickering. Some researchers think this ability to find faces and forms may have laid the groundwork for myth-making. Stars are just random dots. Until you happen to see a hunter chasing a bear in the sky. The face of Mars? It's just a pile of rocks and light play, but we wanted it to be something. It isn't. That drive to assign meaning where none exists has a bigger sibling, and from pareidolia we go up to apophenia, and this is when you connect the dots a little too enthusiastically, you know, like those conspiracy theorists with the red yarn boards, but Roots of apophenia are pareidolia, pattern seeking, a little overboard. In caves like in Las Monedas and La Pasiega, the artist didn't start by drawing on smooth, empty rock. They chose the spots where the natural shape of the caves already whispering to them, this is a rhino's haunch, that is a mammoth's trunk. They would enhance those natural features with minimal lines or shading, adding just enough to make the figure visible. They weren't covering the wall, they were revealing it, integrating their art into the stone until the spirit of the rock and of the image became one. It was a collaboration between nature, perception, and imagination. There's science behind this too. I wish I made this name up, but it's a real guy's name. Dr. Izzy Wisher. He was a PhD student from Durham, and he recently used gaming technology to map these caves. And he was able to resimulate not only every single little subtle crevice and curve on the wall, but even the flickering torchlight, atmospheric conditions, everything. He wanted to see if the theory was correct, that they were using, the bumps were actually influencing them to paint certain animals. And what they found out was even more fascinating. The art moves under torchlight. It's like prehistoric animation. You step left, stag's legs seem to move to the right. Your eye blinks, a bison charges. It's early IMAX theater for them. And we also know that children played a part in these cave paintings, not because it was Cro-Magnon daycare, but kids were believed to have a special connection with the spirit world. They were freshly incarnated, still carrying a foot in the other world. But this wasn't like finger painting time. Some of these caves required squeezing down really narrow crevices, barely wide enough for a child's shoulders. Low oxygen, no light. Kids with torches crawling in the dark. What could go wrong with that? And yet, their handprints are there. And there's smears of pigment too small to be adult fingers. They were definitely there. Now, to be fair, not all the cave art followed the use a bump, turn it into a something method, but the majority of it does. And it's really good, solid evidence that Pareidolia was more than a glitch. It was a guide. We weren't inventing from scratch. We were revealing what was already half there. Early art wasn't just expression. It was collaboration with the unseen, with the wall, with the dark, with the whispers. When you look at a cave painting, you're not seeing what they saw. You're seeing what saw them. Maybe we weren't just making art. Maybe art was making us. But the next time you see a face in the clouds or a monster in the woodgrain, don't look away. That's just rude. Say hello. One last thought before we climb out of the cave and scrape the soot off our jackets. If Pareidolia made us artists by turning cracks in the walls into leopards, did it also curse us with that awful feeling we get from old Victorian dolls that seem to just stare a little too straight or maybe watch you walk by? On the next episode, we're marching straight into the uncanny valley to find out why faces that are almost right feel so very wrong. Until then, bring a candle, maybe a stiff drink, and by all means, ward yourself up. If this episode whispered something strange in your ear, go ahead and click like. Maybe even subscribe. Cool kids subscribe, so do witches, ghosts, and the occasional cryptid with Wi-Fi.